Welcome back, everybody. Bienvenue, tout le monde. We hope you had a few minutes to stretch your legs and ready for our next presentation. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Helena Horluk and Jairus Popik. We're happy to have both Helena and Jairus with us. They are the co-founders of Shoulder to Shoulder and are the directors of the National Warrior Kids programs offered through Wounded Warriors Canada. I'd like to share an interesting fact about our presenters. They are twins. What a coincidence. So are Larissa and I. Try to figure that one out. Anyways, welcome, Helena and Jairus.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you for the introduction. We will begin, and I'm just going to go see how this works for my slides. All right, here we go. Before we begin, we would like to acknowledge that Helena and I are both fortunate to be able to gather on Treaty 6 territory. I thank you very much for the introduction already, but I'm going to begin first. I'm Jairus Popik, and clearly I'm here with my twin sister, Dr. Helena Horluk. We do share a lot of things, including both being professional clinical social workers. And we are excited to be here today from Edmonton, Alberta, because we have worked almost 2 decades with primarily military and first responder families in supporting their mental health needs. We have focused our professional careers in learning more about the impact on secondary effects of occupational stress on veteran and public safety personnel families, especially their children and youth. We have always been looking for ways to fill service gaps that exist for these populations, and in particular, wanting to highlight the voices of young people living in families impacted by an operational stress injury. So 4 years ago, we joined forces with an amazing national service provider, Wounded Warriors Canada. Their aim is in providing excellent culturally specific and evidence-informed programming for both veteran, military, and public safety personnel families across Canada. And we designed and founded the program Warrior Kids. This is a psychoeducational program for kids ages 8 to 16 who have a parent who is either a veteran, current serving military, or first responder, and also impacted by an operational stress injury. Wounded Warriors Canada was one of the first organizations that provided services to this population on a national level and fully embrace and believe what we do. And that is families play an integral role in the health and wellness of the injured member. The Warrior Kids program was designed with this idea that when an operational stress injury is present in a family, all members in that family are impacted, especially children. Since the creation of the Warrior Kids program just 4 short years ago in 2019, we have offered this program to over 600 children and youth. This means Helena and I have both had hundreds of conversations with first responder and veteran parents around information on what they're needing in order to create healthy relationships with their children. So, on to today's topic. We are going to share with you one of our most requested topics, and that is how to create open communication around parental psychological injuries, such as an operational stress injury or post-traumatic stress disorder, with your children and your teens. Today, you'll hear about our experiences from our practice with hundreds of families across Canada, as well as leading evidence and research of what we currently know about parenting with an operational stress injury. So let's start from the beginning. Let's take a look back at how we came to understand the need in supporting entire families, and in particular, children and youth that have a parent with an operational stress injury. Helena and I had been part of supporting the Canadian Armed Forces community During a time period when our military was transformed from peacekeepers to warriors with our engagement in the Afghanistan war. During the early 2000s, we worked alongside military families as they themselves were navigating their own challenges. The uncertainty of when their loved ones were coming home, the fear over their safety, as well as the confusion over the changes they witnessed when finally their loved one returned home, looking unharmed, but definitely changed. At this time, there was still a huge stigma surrounding the accessing of mental health supports for both military and family members. So, as the calls came pouring in from parents seeking help for their child that they had witnessed and started to act out or withdraw, either at home, at school, or both, Helena and I focused on building opportunities for psychoeducational programming that could be offered to children and youth that had a parent impacted by these invisible injuries. We used the evidence that was there and we created an evidence informed, play based psychoeducational programming for military families. This is where we saw transformational change. Parents would do anything for their children, even if they themselves were not ready or able to access formal mental health supports. So, as the years went on, providing interventions directed to children and families impacted when there was a parent with an OSI, we started to see positive changes in all members of the family unit, including the parent with the psychological injury. During one of our early military groups, we had a father who was current serving and had been dealing with undiagnosed PTSD for about 5 years. He came up to us at the end of the program and said, "I'm so proud of my daughters for coming to this program. They talk so openly now about their mental health and what they can do for it. It made me realize if they can do it, so can I." Since those days, we know a lot more about the complex nature of operational stress within military and first responder occupations. Great new Canadian research tells us important factors that we need to consider in operational stress. For example, one of the first things that we know is that trauma is different. We used to think that the big T trauma was only part of the conversation that we could focus on. But now we know that the collection of small t traumas are just as important and can make huge differences on negative impacts of mental health. The other thing that we know now is that organizational and operational factors, including things like overburdening of paperwork or shift work, or the negative interactions that we might have, or additional factors that are created within the operational structures of these particular occupations. That the research is telling us that those operational organizational factors can at times be more impactful on negative mental health than the trauma itself. An area of research that is exceedingly growing is during this time period is the information on the secondary impact of trauma on children. We used to ask the question, is there impact on a child if their parent is impacted by PTSD? We would focus a lot on, well, if the child didn't directly witness the trauma, then how could they possibly affect it? However, through research, we know that yes, there is a bidirectional impact between the parent with the psychological injury and the child. The main reason is PTSD is a relational disorder. One of the things that's very interesting is the fact that many individuals can function very well at work with PTSD or an operational stress injury. However, it's when they arrive home and they need to relate emotionally that things can fall apart. Symptoms and behaviors that are connected to the operational stress injury that is inherently relational and observable has a greater impact on parenting. One of the activities that we do in our program, one of the important aspects to our programming, is providing information to children about what an operational stress injury is. The other part of the program is allowing time and opportunity for them to process what does it mean to them. This picture in the slide shows this example. We asked children to draw, to write a poem, or to create an image of what an operational stress injury looks like to them through their eyes. In this particular picture, we see a father and a son that has been drawn. The dad is saying, "I hate you, bro." The son is saying, "But why?" Then the story at the bottom of the slide says, "Dad hates Gerard for no reason and will not play or do stuff with him. Gerard feels sad." This picture tells us of a story of how operational stress injuries create major interruptions in relationships when open communication about this often very complex operational stress injury is present within the family. Likely, the information that I've just gone over is not new information or something that you didn't already know. However, we hope this information signals to you what it signals to us when we know and hear about the evidence and the research behind the need for secondary impacts on children. And whichever context you're here today, whether you're in leadership, whether you're a parent, whether you're a peer, whether you're a professional, that you see this information telling you this. There is a critical need for incorporating family into the conversation around mental health needs for military and public safety personnel, which means there's also a major gap in services created that is evidence-informed and very high quality, that is designed specifically for kids and youth living with a parent with an operational stress injury. So we want to introduce to you the program, the Warrior Kids program that we've designed that's going to help meet some of that need. And the program is designed into two formats. It's designed as an in-person 2-day camp, and that's offered 3 locations across Canada, in Kelowna, BC, in Ontario, and in Edmonton, Alberta. We also have 3 times a year a virtual program that is run for all kids across Canada. We've had kids from Inuvik to Cape Breton and very, very remote locations join the virtual program, and that runs as a 6-week, 1-hour program. So we're going to show you a video that's going to capture the impact of the Warrior Kids program, and then we'll pass it over to Helena.
I've been to camps before, but like this was kind of different.
It's a lot of fun. We do a whole bunch of activities.
For them to have this is priceless.
Most important aspect is understanding the impact that operational stress injuries has on family members. So kind of first and foremost, like recognizing that children who have a parent that has been impacted by trauma, that they also have been impacted.
We are all here for a reason, the same reason, and we can all, really come together.
My parents are police, like they're constables and stuff like that. So of course, it's still going to affect them.
I myself have struggled with OSI, and I felt that it was important for him to have some sort of education on it in kids' terms. I didn't know how to explain it to him myself, and it was really difficult for me to try and get across what I was going through personally.
So the idea is we've prepared the kids with the conversation, the communication, the language around kind of what's going on with mom or dad. And then they can take home this kind of gift of knowledge and this understanding, this empathy towards what their parent is going through, and open up opportunities for conversations to happen then further down. With the Dreamcatcher Animal Therapy Ranch, again, learning through the animals and learning through hands-on activities with the animals.
Some animals are extremely scared of you, and some animals are totally okay with you, which is totally normal. Like some people, they're extremely nervous. They'll back up if you go too close to them, and some people don't come closer.
That was a great highlight because I love animals. I connect with animals. They always like warm the heart kind of thing and open up feelings that you never knew you had maybe. This camp was really, really good because you can open up and talk about how your lifestyle is at home with someone with an OSI. Kids can compare and they can be like, hey, yeah, I totally experienced that. You don't feel alone in the whole thing.
We want it to be fun. We want it to be relatable to both the young kids and relatable to the older teens. When they leave camp, they can also practice these concepts when they get home and in years to come.
It's a positive place to be. So if you're in a very bad place, I guess, mentally, they can help you out. And considering they're all counselors, you can always talk to them.
Since reading the book that they created and bringing him here, he's well informed and we can discuss it openly and he understands it, and it's not a stress of mine anymore.
It's been a lot easier to understand your feelings now, because before I was like, why you're crying? Why are you mad at me? Now I understand that it's all from their work.
Yeah, it can be pretty hard, and having a camp like this was really, really helpful.
They can take home this kind of gift of knowledge and this understanding, this empathy towards what their parent is going through, and open up opportunities for conversations to happen. Instead of it being really things that we don't talk about, we want it to be, now we do talk about this and we bring this into the conversation as a family.
I'm going to pass it over to Helena now. So I just want to know, Helena, do you have control of the screen now? Except for you're muted. There we are. Can you hear me now? Good. Yeah. Okay, I have it now. So, okay, so as you can see, this video was a nice introduction to summarize sort of the key points and the highlights of the Warrior Kids program. And the next part that we're going to talk about today is how we're able to really build off of the idea of creating family resilience. And a lot of times people get the impression that really we're only just working with kids and youth of veterans that are impacted by an operational stress injury. Essentially, this is a family program. The work that we've been doing over 18 years now is focused on family resilience. And the family resilience is more about how are we able to strengthen families with changing the narrative? How can we stop compartmentalizing the ways that we're doing or talking about treatment of a veteran? And often that happens when we're thinking about that veteran just doing their thing, getting their treatment or going through the injury, and the families are sort of just doing their own recovery or their own journey separately. We really want to shift this into how do we build resilience as a family? And we, of course, have seen that through the work that we've been doing, and really want to talk a little bit about how we can do this as a family and what does the evidence say about ways we can do this? The first thing is that we know that the recovery process of looking through a post-traumatic stress injury can be messy. It's not a linear process. And we know that it doesn't just go through as a experience or a potentially traumatic event. That veteran walks in to get an assessment, a diagnosis, then their treatment, and then they're off to recovery. This can take many years, and through my practice and Jairus's practice, this can be decades even. And it's a very common story that we work with families in, kind of feeling like maybe it's an add-on service. We want to shift the conversation today about how families can connect with each other and truly feel connected in going through the journey of recovery. And the other thing is, how can they build hope? Hope is essential in resilience. And we've talked a lot about resilience, but what does that actually mean when we're going through something that is seen as a really tough time? And we're going to talk a little bit about how do we create the hope of knowing that this is something that we can get through together as a family. And the last part, it's our most requested topic that we work with families, is the communication. What actually do we say to our kids, our family members, when we are struggling through an injury? Connection is something that we know is essential to building resilience, but connection is just something that we need as human beings. We know that there is an incredible body of literature that supports the evidence of social connection. We know that there's a lot of talk around the importance of peer support and how that becomes both a protective factor and a mitigating factor towards trauma and the impact of post-traumatic stress injuries. But it's also a critical component within family members. And sure, it's easy for me to say this as a social worker standing back, sitting in my office about the importance of connection when we're talking about post-traumatic stress injuries. We know this is difficult because trauma, mental health injuries really leads to isolation and disconnection. But how do we get to the part where Brene Brown talks about connection as being where we're feeling seen, heard, valued? And we've seen this in our Warrior Kids program. I, can't stop but think about examples of how kids and youth can show up virtually in camp to a program where we introduce the purpose of why they're here. And we say to them, you're all here because you have a parent that's a veteran, a military member, or a first responder that has been impacted by an operational stress injury. That in itself makes and helps kids feel connected and less isolated. Then we provide information around what is an operational stress injury. And that knowledge in itself of providing that information, allowing them to learn more about a parent and what their parent's going through, then allows kids to have that opportunity to feel more connected. And that in itself is critically important to what we're talking about when we're talking about family resilience. The next thing is around the idea of hope. Jairus and I obviously feel like we do this work because we genuinely have this conviction that families can recover and grow out of adversity. And we know that that's important. And, the work we do, it's important that obviously we feel that way when we work with families. But it's also important as a parent that you feel like you are able to get through a challenging time. And we recognize that where every family is at can be different. Maybe your journey is that you've been living and living through this for years. Maybe it's just starting. But having that idea that you can recover and grow out of adversity is really important to resilience. I'd like to share an example of a quote that I was given permission from a parent that had their teenager attend our our last Warrior Kids program that was offered in the fall time. A couple, days after the program had finished, he sent this email that I think summarizes how family resilience and hope can be created through the simple aspect of feeling more connected and talking a little bit more about a parent operational stress injury. The parent said, "I wanted to thank you from the bottom of my heart. You've helped my son, Ben, and I've changed the name, open up. I won't go into details, but Ben has witnessed his father go from a happy, go lucky person, loving person, into a dark, angry, and doom and gloom person. It has been a very long slog to get back to half of the person that I used to be. But since being part of your program, he tells me that things will get better. And he smiles at me again. He has more zest for life and is interested in trying new things. Hearing and seeing that positive statement come from him has inadvertently given me more confidence to get back to the life and be a better person again. I'll take that win and run with it. Thank you very much. Thank you for helping my boy be a boy again." I think it's important for us to look at recovery from a shift from just the presence and absence of symptoms and behaviors of post-traumatic stress. But how can we shift our view on recovery as being able to have meaningful relationships with our family members, with others in the community? And also, how can we just live with purpose despite the absence or the presence of behaviors or symptoms of an operational stress injury? I think that quote is incredibly important in sharing that that parent hasn't fully recovered in my sense of reading that email. But creating hope to continue that journey of recovery is incredibly important. So when we think about the idea of, I think there's a slide. Oh, maybe not. When we think about how do we get to this point, one of, again, the critical components of the work that we've done with the families, whether it's with warrior kids, we think that, discussion around what the injury looks like and supporting resilience within families comes down to communication. Communication is the last section of our presentation today, and it's really going to highlight kind of the cornerstone that we believe in resilience. And, the communication processes, one thing to highlight before we get into more of the specific pieces, one of the things to highlight around communication within families, that it's not only the message of what you want to kind of talk about with your families, so giving them the message, but it's how this message is being conveyed. Being able to be clear and concise about what it is that you want to talk about with your family, also doing it in a way that allows for open emotional expression. The idea is that, we're really able to showcase that we're okay with obviously joyful and the happy experiences in our family, but we also want to be able to be okay with our family members, our kids, our youth, talking about some of the difficult and kind of the harder emotions. So that's what open emotional expression means. Lastly, communication is about also collaborative problem solving. This means that we're able to be open to having discussions, having arguments around certain things, but ultimately we can sit down and find a solution to what's going on within our family, whether or not it's an operational stress injury or multiple things that are happening in your family, and we can do this together as a family. The next part we're going to talk about is injury communication. So this is where we're able to have these conversations, and through our practice over the years, we have had many, many discussions around how do we talk about this injury. And the idea is that it isn't necessarily, as much as we'd like to think about it as being a one-time only, we can just tell our kids what's happening and then we don't have to worry about talking about it again. It will be an ongoing process. And the process of being able to talk a little bit about kind of where you're at and how things are going is what we're talking about. parents will think that they need to know exactly what the end point is, or maybe feel like they have to be in that aspect of, or that journey of recovery already, or feel like they've recovered before they're able to talk to their kids. But we want to encourage, and we know that there is important evidence to support the idea that if we have an open and ongoing, developmentally appropriate information provided to our kids, that this essentially is the healthy part of the conversation. The other part is that you don't have to worry about ensuring that you don't have to talk about the trauma or the traumatic experience in order to share information about the actual injury, or what you're struggling with as a parent with an operational stress injury. Sometimes we shy away, of course, from protecting our children from the injury and feel like we don't want to talk about it with the best intentions. But we want to be able to know that if we don't talk about the information or we don't talk about the injury, children often will catastrophize what has happened. And ultimately, that increases their worry and their stress about what's happening. And that could increase, ultimately, risk for mental health problems. The next is we're going to talk about the steps to take around injury communication. So the first step, and this is the idea of ways that we can think about how we can actually sit down as a parent and talk to our kids or our youth about our mental health injury. We understand that this, again, is complex, and there often is planning involved prior to having these conversations. And you have to be able to feel comfortable with your own injury and how you want to talk about it, and take into consideration the unique aspects of your family. And of course, when we say steps to take, it sounds prescriptive, but we are hoping that you don't take this as sort of this cookie cutter approach, but you use information that you think might be the most appropriate to your family situation. So you can plan when to have this conversation. The conversation obviously will be more successful if you plan to have it in a way that it's not reactionary. So being able to think about, when are you feeling the most calm? When are your family members, your kids or your youth, feeling most comfortable to have conversations that might be more difficult? Next is being able to think about the conversation less as a sort of preaching type of conversation and more as an opportunity to share information and check back then with your kids, with your youth, about what they might have for questions and what they've understood. The next is to plan according to their age. We know that there can be important differences between whether or not you're talking to a very young child, say 6 or 7, versus a teenager that's 16 or 17 years old. What they're able to comprehend is different. So young children, they dose information. It's like my young children, it's like a squirrel moment. It's just short pieces of information that they're able to retain. Older kids, like teenagers, youth, they may seem like they're not paying attention, but in turn, they actually are paying attention. There are certain tools and resources that actually have been created that can be very helpful, that you can use to start with the conversation. One example we have here is a book that we've developed that assists in helping young children understand more about an operational stress injury. This book, Larry's Big Adventure, is an example. Sesame Street has developed a Talk, Listen, Connect series for very young children, starting at the ages of 4, to talk about a parent operational stress injury. And another example is Dr. Dan Siegel, his hand brain. He talks the example about flipping the lid, but he shows an example of in YouTube videos of ways we can understand more about how our brain is processing when we're going through a traumatic impact of a traumatic brain injury or a post-traumatic stress injury. Here are some examples that are starting points for starting the conversation. I'd like to talk to you about some tough times that I'm dealing with right now. I know we talk about how important it is for us to be open and honest with each other. I've been dealing with some difficult stuff lately, and I would like to talk to you for a few minutes. Or you could say, I've been a bit crabby, grumpy, withdrawn, tense, or down lately. I want to tell you a little bit about what's going on for me. As you can see, the beginning of a conversation doesn't have to start with a traumatic event that you're talking about. More importantly, you want to be able to just start with explaining that you have had a stressful event happen. We recognize that many veterans, this has happened perhaps years ago. So you could use an example where you could say that you had a bad experience that still bothers you today, and it happened a long time ago. A really scary thing happened to you, and when you think about it, it still makes you feel upset. You won't be sharing the details because talking about this event is hard, but I'm working on moving forward with my life and with you and our family. I hope that you know that if I give you more information about PTSD, it will help you understand me better. Once you talk about the experience that you have experienced a stressful event, you can go into choosing why or how you want to name this injury. Again, we've referred to this as an invisible injury. We often compare it to the difference between a physical injury and an invisible injury. You can say that I have an invisible injury, also known as post-traumatic stress disorder, or is a mental health injury. And you can choose language, again, that is most appropriate to the age and stage of your child. What I think is more important isn't necessarily what you've named the injury, but it goes into this part of the conversation where you're able to identify what are certain behaviors that are linked to this injury. So this might be identifying what are certain sights, sounds, or smells. These are certain triggers that lead you to feel overwhelmed and a need to break down or a need to take a break or to calm down. An example here is, I worry and feel tense a lot. It's hard for me to relax, and I can get angry really quickly, and I'm sure you've noticed that lately. We know that anger and emotional numbing are one of the key symptoms that will impact relationships, often between children and their parents. So the anger sometimes is something that parents will talk a little bit more about or provide examples about, or the emotional numbing leads often to the isolation. So that sometimes is events that you can't attend or certain things that you feel like you've been able to participate in before that you no longer are able to participate in as a result of your operational stress injury. The hope is that you're able to have the conversation. Again, it doesn't have to be one full conversation, but the hope is that the aim of the conversation is recognizing that you know that this injury that you have affects everyone in the family. The idea is that you want to be able to have and create a shared knowledge around the injury with the family. And this means that once you provided developmentally appropriate information to your kids, to your youth, that you're also able to recognize what are some of the consequences that they might recognize. So at times it might be attending treatment or things that you're not able to attend that you've missed. The key points around this is that you want to be able to assure them that your behavior changes that you have are a result of the injury. And the tension in the family is not their fault. And lastly, you don't want them to worry about taking on the responsibility of trying to fix the injury. And this is a huge part of the work that we do. And we've seen the impact that this can have with children feeling that they're maybe the cause of certain behaviors or tensions that are happening in the family. Taking away the responsibility on young children's shoulders is critically important to this type of conversation. We would like you to also feel comfortable and kind of support yourself in feeling comfortable around expressing your feelings of how this operational stress injury has been tough for your child. So what this really can be, an example, is knowing that you know that it's tough for them, but you want to be there to support them. This shifts, again, the conversation about how you still want to be part of their world as their parent. We have found that a lot of times parents feel like they're not part of that parenting decision making or part of the joy and the positive aspects of parenting, which then have a reactionary effect with children withdrawing from their own parent because of that. This is where you're able to say, I really do love you. I want you to know that just because I wasn't able to attend your coaching event, your soccer game, your basketball, or coaching you, driving you to friends, all these different examples, doesn't mean that I don't love you. And then this leads into saying, what are some ways that we together as a family can still feel connected? Or what are some, because I can't do these things, what are some things that we can do instead? And the collaborative problem solving goes back to the ability that kids and youth, once they understand what you're going through, are able to share some great examples and ability to problem solve around what are some ways that you can still, as a family, as a parent, develop these meaningful family relationships. So to close off, at the end of our presentation, we'd like to highlight just a simple quote again that we received from a parent who she was a first responder with her 2 kids that came to our Ontario program, actually the Ontario camp in the summertime. And we really wanted to highlight how we think that providing information to kids can, again, increase the ability for families to connect and feel more connected to each other and less responsible. And quote here. So she sent this in again with permission for us to share. And she said that while the camp was less than 2 days, it made a huge impact on our family. The following day, I received news that affected me greatly and triggered me. The kids were totally different in responding to it, as they recognized that my demeanor was not a result of anything I did. They simply came up, gave me a hug, and said it was okay. Again, we think that this is an example of why we're able to open communication and feel how important it is that kids are able to be part, and kids and youth are able to be part of the journey of working and understanding what a parent is going through. And thank you very much. I believe, Jairus, did you have anything else to add about the Word Kids on this part? No, I think there's possibly live questions maybe. Okay,
Yes,
possibly,
there
yes.
is.
Okay, all right.
There is.
And there's
So,
Pollyanna, got it.
yeah, so I've joined you. Thank you, ladies. Always lovely to hear your conversation. And every time you present, I learn something new again. And love the examples that you're giving. So, just a couple. One is just a comment. The work Helena and Jairus is doing is life changing. I would totally agree with that. And then this one is, and you may or may not be able to answer it, but I thought I would put it out there. Are there any specific resources or programs available to young adult survivors of
Mm.
parents who were RCMP first responders diagnosed with OSI? They never had access to any of these type of resources in the past, and as they're older now, so and will likely affect their life. So I'll just let you answer that one if you can.
Well, I think that probably Helena and I, you know what, it is a question that comes to us many, many times. And like I mentioned at the very beginning of the presentation, the service gaps for this particular population is really just really big. I don't know of any programs that are specifically addressing adult children. I know, Pollyann, we've talked about this many times as well. We've had conversations with organizations like OSIS as well that kind of focus more on the adult realm of peer support. But we're not aware of any programs that are specifically targeting the adult children population around this particular secondary impact of trauma.
Right.
So, Helena, unless you have anything to add to that part.
No, just simply that we were just in Vancouver yesterday and presenting, and we had a retired RCMP officer say that she was a parent, or she was a child of an RCMP officer with post-traumatic stress disorder, grew up, normalized it, then joined the RCMP herself. And then it wasn't until her grandchild that she actually realized, wow, I need to stop this cycle of how we're parenting around this. So it's certainly something that she said, I wish I had this information as well growing up. And now, she was retired as RCMP, and it was 3 generations already.
Right. Thank you so much. And I know we've chatted about it. We have work to do in the adult child impact piece. Just one more quick question. If the spouse hasn't acknowledged the injury, is it addressed in the camps? So children going, but maybe their parent hasn't.
Yeah, I mean, we know that can be a pretty big barrier, of course, and the hope is, the program is designed so that parents are at least recognizing that there's a level of injury. Again, we work a lot with talking to parents before that can happen, if that is a barrier to, because we want to set the kids and the youth up for success. So if the parent is not recognizing that there is an injury, and it depends, but if it's a pretty strong, aversion to the injury, but if it's, that sometimes it's really helpful to have parents have an understanding of a level of impact of the injury prior to it attending the program. Because of course, then these strategies and tools we're offering to the kids to then bring back into their own family lives. So the idea is that we are willing to work with parents. That's a lot of the work that we do to get them to the point where they're able to see. That doesn't mean that they need to get assessment, a treatment diagnosis at that stage, but it's just being able to say, hey, yeah, I have been impacted, is really important.
Great. Thank you. I'm going to turn it over to Huff quickly.
Helena and Jairus, thank you so much for participating with us today. Again, I wish your program was around in the 80s and the 90s when I was serving. So much to take away. I love that video as well too. It was very, very impactful and a bit emotional as well too, especially that one slide the slide prior to that really hit home. And thank you so much for some of the communication tips. I was busy writing down a lot of that, so hopefully your resources will be available not only for us at Atlas, but also for the participants in this. So again, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you again for having us and allowing us to be part of this conversation. Again, it's so important. So thank you.